So how long are we supposed to wait? When the promises have been made for so very long. The cleanup was supposed to be finished by June 30th of 2017. If we were to do the math on that, times 3 parties, times $15,000 per day per party, times 640 days, that's over $28 million in penalties, and yet no one has asked. So we're really, really appreciative that the city of Los Angeles is now standing up and is going to protect the people. For a decade now, we've been promised a cleanup, and it hasn't even started. They haven't even pretended to do this. Instead, during the shutdown, they decided to come up with their record of decision that they weren't going to follow the AOC, that they had been spending 9 years reassuring the communities impacted, where we have 54 children with cancer, way above the national norms. We need help. So we appreciate this effort to make them comply. Thank you so much. So a lot of things have happened in the last few, I guess it's several weeks, because we've had legislative opportunities to finally get Santa Susana cleaned up, thanks to Melissa Bumstead and her incredible work, Parents versus Santa Susana Field Laboratory, as far as gathering 600,000 signatures supporting full cleanup. We're really starting to be heard, and that is so exciting. I wanted to go through a few of the details so you can see why we feel this is so important and why what the Department of Energy is trying to do right now is unacceptable. So on Monday, we're going down to City Council Budget Committee to support a motion that is going to direct the city attorney and to have appropriated funds to enact proper litigative efforts in order to enforce the agreement. So I'm going to show you a few things that I think are really relevant. So first off, we have this here, and I'll show the inside. This is the draft. I also have the final. This is the historical site assessment that was paid for under EPA contract EP S70505 task order 0038 December 2011. This was under Obama's American Reinvestment and Recovery Act, and that is where $42 million were spent doing a proper historical site assessment, which means what went on at the site. It was over the course of 6 decades, and because there was so little transparency, a lot of this was not known. So these are undisputed facts now. So what's interesting about that is after the Woolsey fire, which started on the Boeing property and burned 80% of the Santa Susana Field Laboratory back in November, what we now have is that they say that they couldn't find any radiation despite the findings of this. And I'm going to show you a map of what they found, which shows unequivocally that there is radiation and chemicals remaining far beyond health risk. And the idea to go back on this promise after saying that they were going to comply for 9 years, and it should have been done long before the fire, so then it would have just been another brush fire. So this is really important. This is also important. I did a FOIA, and this was the response that I got from the federal government as far as correspondence between the CAG and the Department of Energy, to the point where they actually directed what they wanted to hear from the public in order to go forward with their solution. So that is inappropriate at the very least. Another thing I have here is that NEPA was not followed, because there's a very specific directive, and it comes from an executive memorandum, both from 2012 and Executive Order 13045, which is protection of children from environmental health risks and safety risks. And that was April 21st, 1997. It was also reaffirmed in 2012 by the Obama administration. So this is a requirement that they use the priority. Let me read it to you. The protection of children from environmental health risks and safety risks directs federal agencies, to the extent permitted by law and appropriate, to make it a high priority to identify and assess environmental health and safety risks that may disproportionately affect children. But the point is that they acknowledge that children are more susceptible. And in the case of Santa Susana Field Laboratory, we have a cluster of children that have had very rare cancers, far beyond what is normal, what is in the normal statistical averages of those particular cancers. They also coincide very much with radiosensitive cancers. So we have that. We have 1,000 pages of correspondence that seems to be inappropriate. And then we have the result of that study that shows, obviously, when they issued a multi-agency report that said that they didn't find any radiation. It only took them 3 days, and they were able to make that determination over a period of time where the site owners said that they didn't have access to the site because power lines were down. So somehow they were able to take 3 samples and make that determination despite being involved in this. Everybody, we were all involved in it together, and that's why, to be honest, several of us in the community were involved, because we thought that if we went every step of the way, we would be able to believe the results, and we do. But now they lost the results. So I'm showing you, again, they're right here, and this is, it's amazing. So I encourage anybody who wants a copy of any of the specific data that is in here, including the historical site assessment portion, which I would say is the most interesting. Let me know. Send me an email, Christina@peoplepolicy.org. Okay, so we're going also into what this means. We've been kicking the can down the road for decades. Not we, they. We're just this generation of people trying to fight for this standard. This has gone on for so very long, started by Dan Hirsch, the women of the Knolls that first told this story, and so many heartbreaking examples of how it has disproportionately affected the families surrounding the Santa Susana Field Laboratory, and the work that they have done to basically divide the community and make people more afraid of the solution than addressing the problem, by making them afraid of trucks and things like that, is really inappropriate. So I've been reading through this guide. It's called the Citizen's Guide to NEPA. NEPA is the National Environmental Policy Act. And that is where they are supposed to weigh the risks of the solution versus the risks of the problem. And it's the size of 2 telephone books, for those of you who are old enough to know what a telephone book is. And that's what the draft EIS, the Environmental Impact Statement, it's interesting that it's a statement, it's this thick, but that's how they do it. And so the draft versus the final, I now have both, and I was very surprised after 9 years of reassurances that they were going to follow the agreement that they voluntarily signed. Now all of a sudden they say that they're not going to, and instead of providing a solution that is compliant with the AOC, the Administrative Order on Consent, they've chosen to do much, much less. In fact, to leave what we believe to be approximately 98% remaining, which is unacceptable. And the reason we say that is because the difference between the map that they've shown us, where they acknowledge where the contamination is, versus the map that they show us of what they would remove
under this new scheme, and I call it a scheme because that's what it is, it shows that they would basically have to do nothing more. So we're giving them 2%, assuming that they might do something. But truly, according to the new map, they're basically done. And that's unacceptable. We've watched them dishonestly pull stuff out on weekends. Meanwhile, they're doing tree plantings with kids to make it appear safe, to make it feel safe. Well, the families that have been affected don't feel safe. The families that live by those people don't feel safe either. And so when we look at these rules, executive orders that are supposed to be protecting us, and we learn that they're just being ignored when they're supposed to make a specific priority when there's a concern about children's health. And there's obviously a concern of children's health when somebody like Melissa can show a map of 54 children. And before that, there were 13 kids with retinoblastoma, which was cancer of the eye, of the retina. And the solution to that was that all but one had to have one of their eyes removed. So think about that. And then the treatment that they had to undergo as children puts them at risk for other cancers. So that's also unacceptable. So we can't continue to accept these rare kinds of cancers that appear oftentimes only in areas that have been affected by radiation or the chemicals used, such as these rocket test sites. I wanted to shout out thank you to Melissa Ospina, who's one of those moms that long ago was relying on water from well water, and that affected her child, who wound up with Hodgkin's lymphoma. And she made this, and it's a reminder to me. I was using it because I was trying to do this outside, but she and so many others have been working to try to get a solution, to tell the story, and have been met with so much resistance. And it's time for people to listen. So I'm really appreciative that the city of Los Angeles appears to be stepping up and standing up for the people. And I'm just really thrilled and grateful for that. For Melissa's really great event that we had at the Malibu Wine and Beer Garden, it was really great. And I hope that we're going to have another one really, really soon. But telling the story and being able to compare notes and talk to each other was really important. And it's been something that has been really lacking. So thank you so much. For the event, I made a bunch of postcards, and this one is for the retinoblastoma kids. And what we're doing is we're sending them to the governor, or in this case is to Cal EPA Secretary Jared Blumenfield. Thank you so much for standing up, both of you, for this issue. So the idea is addressing them to our lawmakers, our decision makers, and making them personalized so that they hear us and they remember and they realize that it matters to a lot of people and that our voices matter and they need to be heard. This one's a favorite. No disrespect, really quite the opposite, but I think it's really important to make sure that we are heard, and sometimes we have to use, I'd like to think, creative ways to do so. So you'll let me know if you don't think so. Anyway, so if you would like a postcard and you would like to mail them, again, let me know, PM me, and I will get those out to you. Thanks.